session. Afternoon, colleagues. We'll start our live session just in probably about half a minute or so. We'll let a couple of more people in. Okay. Afternoon, everybody. You're all very welcome to our lunch and learn. We just give you one minute, 1 second more actually, and I'll start. I just want to do something in the room. Apologies, that's not my usual location, so the door to the office is wide open. Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. You're all very welcome to our 12th and our final Lunch and Learn session for 2023 on the important topic of dignity at work, understanding what bullying is and is not. For those of you who aren't aware, these information sessions are intended to provide information that complement or supplement our established training programs, and they support other union events such as conferences and also try to encourage engagement from our broader membership. So it's open to all members, activist representatives, and as always, we ask you to circulate these notices as widely as you possibly can. We're also always seeking new topics of interest to our representatives and our activists. So if you have anything you want to learn more about, please let us know either in the chat or email skillsacademy@forsa.ie any time of the year, and we can schedule something into our programme. The sessions are pretty popular, and whilst we get a high level of registrations, for those who can't attend for the live session, it is recorded. So just to be aware that we're recording this for YouTube. It's on the Skills Academy channel. And I'd also like to say, for those of you who've indicated to me that you can't always attend the lunchtime session, please email us your questions in advance, and we will put them to our guest speaker when they're here. So today, I'm absolutely delighted. You see him sitting beside me. I'm delighted to welcome back to us in Forsa our colleague Desi Robinson, one of our former national secretaries, who actually also still provides us with tuition on our health and safety courses, because he's a long track record of his expertise in health and safety for a long number of years. So he's recently organised a seminar with us in Nearnese Court on the topic of dignity at work. And he organised some really good speakers and contributions to that. So Desi's going to take the question. Can I ask everyone to mute their mics, please? So Desi's going to make a presentation on dignity at work, and as always, if I can ask you to put your questions into the chat, and then I'll put those questions to Desi at the end of the session, if that's okay. So Desi, I'll leave it up to you.
Thanks, Fiona, and welcome everybody. To say, first of all, thanks. I'm always delighted to be invited to do something like this, because I think it's such an important issue that people have spoken about bullying in the workplace, and often people misinterpret what it is and what it isn't. So hopefully today we might not, I'm not just going to talk about what it is and what it is, but I'm also going to tell you, for those of you who are experiencing difficulties in the workplace, I'm going to show you, where to go and how to, make complaints, and hopefully give you some idea as to, a way forward for not for yourself. It may be for a colleague. It may be for a family member. I think it's always important to realise that often people, I often, as a union official, people do come to you now and then and said, it's not for me, it's for a friend, but could you give me some information? It does, as far as I'm concerned, it's really important that we provide a service to everybody, anybody that's suffering out there, particularly from bullying. And I will say from the very, very start that this bullying is one of them things that Like if you have a broken arm or a broken ankle, I mean, you can get some tablets and you'll sleep well. This stuff will keep you awake all night, wondering whether or not you are being bullied, or have you done something wrong. So hopefully I can shine some light on that for you. And please do ask questions. I'm more than welcome to ask any questions. But as Fiona mentioned, we recently organised a survey of Force members. I nearly said impact there, but of Force members, and surprisingly, we got a huge return on the survey. Like just under 5,000 members, it filled out the survey, and we found 68% of them had said they had experienced bullying or witnessed bullying. Huge amounts of people, So it's a huge difficulty. Can I just say, I'm just gonna, what is bullying? Typically, you'll see here, when I started doing this work, and believe it or not, it was about 25 years ago that I was asked to do for the Irish Congress of Trade Unions Education and Training Services. I was asked to do a 3-day health and safety course. And on that 3-day health and safety course, safety representative course, there was a pre-term course already. And he asked me to look at it and also deliver it. So I started delivering it, and there was an hour set aside for stress and bullying in the workplace. And I said, oh yeah, that's good. Yeah, had a look at it. By the time I finished doing that program, almost 7 years later, I was spending, and I could have spent the full day, because the extent of the problem, because a lot of the time, certainly when I was growing up, and maybe some of you, the word bullying was associated with school place bullying. I worked in a mainly male-dominated workplace for a number of years, and when I started investigating bullying and looking at the bullying, and then I actually done my thesis not on bullying, but on the Health and Safety and Welfare at Work Act, which included a lot of the bullying stuff, and I looked at it, I realised some of the stuff I'd witnessed in the workplace. There's some of the stuff we actually did, and some of the stuff that sometimes people didn't realise what you were doing. That, like, there was people coming into the canteen that may not be the best looking, or they may have. Or there was one guy had a curvature of the spine, and there was guys making sounds of the bells, like Quasimodo, things like that. But also some of the more subtle tactics, like blocking people's promotions and that. So the type of bullying is not the physical bullying that we're talking about, that, the big fella in the school battering the little fella in the school, or the little girl or the big girl in the school, or vice versa. It's not that anymore. It never really was anyway. But I think we've come to realise that what it is, that this is, if you're deliberately setting out to undermine somebody, if you deliberately set a pattern out, then you're bullying somebody. So I think that was important. So it was important for me because, like, as I said, it was associated with the school place, and it's very much associated with the workplace now. Okay, so just for the definition, and it's important. Now, we're going to be only talking about bullying today. We're not talking about harassment, because harassment is a completely different area. In actual fact, under the Act, it's under the Equality Act. Harassment is taken under the 9 grounds. So what we're talking about here is bullying, and the definition of bullying in the workplace. So workplace bullying can be defined as repeated inappropriate behaviour, direct or indirect, whether verbal, physical or otherwise, conducted by one or more persons against another or others at the place of work, or in the course of their employment, which could reasonably be regarded as undermining the individual's right to dignity at work. So dignity at work is what's important here. An isolated instance, and this is important, an isolated instance of behaviour described in the definition may be an affront to dignity at work, but a once-off instance for the purpose of this is not considered bullying. So even if you go in, if you were to take a case outside of here, go into the WRC and said, well, they humiliated in front of my work colleagues, they'd say a once-off instance is not covered. It's considered to be, it's not considered to be bullying. A key characteristic of bullying is that it usually takes place over a period of time. It is irregular and persistent, inappropriate behaviour, which is specifically targeted at one employee or a group of employees. It may be perpetrated by someone in a position of authority, by an employee against the manager or by employees. Now, I have to say, over the years, and anybody knows me knows that I'm a long time around, and apart from working in the training area of a Congress, I was involved as in the union much earlier than that as a lay official. And, you know, the people would always say it's always a manager or it's always a supervisor. Now, a lot of surveys have shown it can be, but a lot of the time I've dealt with, as a union official, I've dealt with employee against employee, people working in the same office. You know, so it's not always people of authority, although, you know, people say they're the people who have the power, they're the people who use it against us. But I have to say, here as an official, I didn't always find that. I found quite often I was dealing with cases of two people working in an office or working in maybe in the same area, but maybe in a different office, or, you know, that sort of thing. So it's not always one to the, it's right across the board from colleague to colleague. Okay, so bullying and the forms of bullying, you know, the use of aggressive or obscene language. And again, no need, I always say there is no need to talk to people in an aggressive manner. I actually think you've lost it. You've lost it. If you've had to do that, you've lost it. You know, using obscene language, just time the place. I mean, I also worked on building sites where, you know, you'd have to have a hard neck, and working with 700 men, and predominantly men for years, the obscene language, but it was what they consider adult language. But it's obscene if people's upset by it. You know, supervisory aggression. I often think in this area, and if I was doing a physical course on anybody that's done one with me, I would draw it out on a clipboard, what I believe to be the problem with, you know, people get promoted into positions well beyond their competence. So people often get promoted, and there's a principle, and people have heard me saying this before. It's called the Peter principle, and it states that people are eventually promoted beyond their competence. So often people get promoted that into a position where they may have been. Now, I'm using may have been because I'm not only talking about accountants or anybody else or people working, but people who work at that, very, very good accountants or bookkeepers, or, you know, that they're promoted then into a supervisory, maybe into a HR role or looking after people, and they don't have that extra skill that's required to look after people. Brilliant at the job that they do, but often promoted beyond that. I see it quite a bit, and certainly when I was looking after SNAs, I've seen it quite a bit with school principals. And if there's anybody else from the teachers union, I don't have a problem saying this because I've said it to them. Quite often, I would have seen people, you know, principal promoted into a position, and they were, you know, an excellent teacher, but not a good principal, where they now have to manage people and they have an ability or an inability to manage people. Great on one side of it, they're promoted beyond their capabilities often. And I know in small places, small country villages, where I actually represented people where because of their association with maybe even with the church, that they're automatically promoted into the position, and they really just don't have the ability. Now, that's just for instance. There's lots of other instances I could show you and I could tell you about, but I would say often that's the case, that people don't have the people skills and end up bullying and harassing, bullying people in particular to get something done. I believe that's the right way to go about it. So isolation or excluding people, and there's nothing as bad. And again, I've seen this in real life, seeing people just because they're, for whatever reasons, they maybe have a difficulty, excluding them from the conversation, excluding them from nights out. And more so now, even more, we're seeing exclusion from WhatsApp groups. Just we have everybody else, but you're excluded, and some of the talk might be even. So, that's deemed to be forms of bullying. Verbal, or being ridiculed, just being, that's all forms of bullying. I'll show you some more subtle. The obvious tactics obviously would be shouting at staff in public or in private. There should be never, ever any need to shout at people. If you've got an ability to manage staff, you won't be shouting at them. You'll talk to them, and you'll talk to them in private, or you'll talk to them, but you'll use a tone that will get something done. I know personally from managing a football team, and these would be 10-year-old children and 11-year-old, and some of them I had to tell them what to do, and some of them I had to ask them to do it. And there's a huge difference. And managing staff require you to be able to have that skill set to allow you and show you how to manage. There's people come in for lots of different reasons, and the way you approach them. So I often say a lot of the time the management side are not trained properly in dealing with people. I think that's a huge factor in a lot of this. Instantaneous rages often over trivial matters, just getting annoyed. Now we do look at who doesn't commit to work in a bad form some mornings. Some people come into bad form every morning, but by and large, people come in some mornings and they may not be themselves, or they may say something or do something. That wouldn't be considered bullying. But if you've done it every morning, that'd be different. So personal insults and name calling. Again, I often describe this as, if, say for instance, I said something to you, I usually know immediately that I've upset you. I'm sure there's nobody online here that hasn't said something and wished he could take back the words. You've seen the person that you've said it to, and you know that you've insulted them, but you had no intention of really insulting them. But if you were to continue that, so that's, so personal insults, if you continue doing it, it would be considered. So persistent criticism, I mean, you can't constantly criticize somebody without taking them aside and telling them what the issues are. So persistent criticism and other obvious tactics, and public humiliation. I often describe, I was in a shop once, and I can't even say this because one of my relations had just gotten the job as a manager of the shop. And when we went in to see her, just because we were there, she roared at a staff member down a little bit further to show that she was in authority. And, I said, don't need to do that, but that's what she believed. She wanted to show people that she was in authority, she was the boss. And she'd only been promoted in recent times. So that's a horrible thing to do to somebody, just to show somebody else that you're in a position of power. Okay, more subtle tactics would be setting objectives with possible deadlines. Now, I've seen this in action, where people are actually given tasks which they know it's impossible to achieve, but they know then that they can then go back to them and say, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. So even removing areas of responsibility without any real reason to do it. I mean, there's nothing as bad as you've been responsible for an area or doing a job and then being told that you're no longer doing it, no real reason as to why. I mean, if you had an inability to do it, you should be told. You should be told a reason why. And even more so then, would be setting meaningless tasks, like setting tasks well below someone's capabilities, but with the intentions of humiliating them. So it's not just saying, because sometimes we're all asked to do things that, you say, that's not, it's usually because it's above your pay grade, but sometimes you might be asked to do something. And I mean, but if it's a deliberate attempt to set that, to humiliate you, to show you up, then that'd be bullying. Constantly changing working guidelines. So yeah, you reach that stage, and now here they are again. They're setting it. You've done that. You want to move it and change it, and deliberately setting out to change it. Again, just ignoring, as I said earlier on, ignoring or excluding an individual. Even talking through third party. If you're around long enough, you will see this, that people would, what does she think she's doing, to somebody else beside them? What does she think she's doing? Or, who does he think he is? So talking to somebody else about the person, they're all kind of subtle tactics. Now, this one, in terms of turning down leave without any discernible reason, that one often came up, well, it certainly came up for me, was, when people would say, when someone had an opportunity to decide when you could take your leave or not, they would make sure that, oh, well, I'm going to make sure you're not going to get we know that you travel down home around Christmas time, but you have to be back in the office on Monday. No real reason for it, but other than making sure that you're going to be uncomfortable because you can't get the Monday off after Christmas or bank holidays or whatever it is. Now, this one here, blocking a person's promotion. I seen this. When I look back at my working life, I seen this in action. And I have to say, I wasn't in the trade union movement at the time. I was in a workplace. So in case anybody sees that that I was seeing it somewhere in here, no, I didn't. I seen it in a factory where it was actually, the guy was actually, he was a shop steward like myself, but he had an intentions of moving into management. And to be honest with you, he was very, very good. And I thought he'd been a better manager than he was a shop steward. And but one of the managers there, when he started to move up the ladder a bit, deliberately set, in place things to block him, to make sure that his production targets were lower, that scrap levels, we worked in a tire factory, scrap levels were lower. But he was his boss, and he could see the day where that would turn around and he would be the other way around. Now, he'd done a lot to block his promotion, but eventually he did get promoted and he did become his boss. And I think he did remember what happened to him when he was on his way up. But the point I make is that does happen. And I'm sure somebody online here probably knows somebody or has seen this yourself. Okay, just some more examples. Again, persistently challenging or undermining a person's authority. Again, nothing is bad. I'm sorry, much in time, by the way.
You're okay.
Yeah, I might.
Okay.
Okay, I'll put that down just because I'm usually doing this. I'm usually doing this on the ground physically. Constantly picking on a person when things go wrong, even when they're not responsible. Even when they're not responsible. So, like, you'll see this. You've all heard the old saying, that success has many fathers. I don't know whether you're allowed to say that now. Should you say success has many fathers or mothers? Should we say? But failure is an orphan. You'll see that operating. You'll see how quickly. I have seen that operating in the trade union movement. Should I say? I have seen it operating. But I'm sure you've seen it in your own office and around place where people, go after. You're not responsible for it, but you're held responsible, or they'll say, or they'll put a word in somebody else's ear that if only she was here or only he was here, it wouldn't have gone that way. So you're working responsible, but your name now is being put forward as someone who's been part of it, and the reason it went wrong is because he or she didn't do any when they may not have been involved in it at all. So excessive supervision and over checking. That is more. I was at a meeting in the Health and Safety Authority yesterday, and there was a guy came over. The new director of EU WASHA came over, and he said that they were able to check that around countries that the excessive checking when people are working from home, that Ireland was fairly high up there in terms of excessive checking. They weren't on top of it. I think he said Holland, but anyway, he was just saying in passing that Ireland, because of now new forms of working, people are working from home, that people are checking over excessive supervision and over checking. Okay. In Ireland we're one of them. Constantly taking credit for another person's work, but never taking the credit when things go wrong. I bet you we've all seen that. How right that would be. Deliberately assigning unpleasant tasks, giving the unsaid tasks to the same person, or even maybe deliberately setting it to the new person in the office, the temporary employee, whatever it may be, but deliberately setting so they're more subtle tactics. Showing hostility to sustain unfriendly behaviour, just because wherever, they come in, they just act unfriendly. They're friendly to everybody else, but they've just show hostility towards you or to your colleagues. Again, that's a more of subtle tax example. So what's the risks? So the signals and the risks I'm going to talk about just briefly. Again, you'll see high turnover of staff. And you're seeing that now because there is an opportunity for people to leave employment and get employment elsewhere. Like we have now at the moment, almost nil unemployment in Ireland. Well, it's 4.84% is deemed nil unemployment. So people can move. But why should they move? You know, so if you're seeing a high turnover of staff, a girl said to me recently that the same person has bullied so many people. They've done exit interviews, and your man is still there. Nothing changed. So, I mean, if there's a high turnover, there has to be a reason, because generally speaking, people don't want to go. You know, generally speaking, if they've been there for a while, they want to stay there. That may suit their circumstances, but they don't want to go. So people's employment tenure, again, people have told me, and I've seen it, you know, the way you hear people saying, she's only temporary. He's only temporary in the opposite. There shouldn't be, because they're only temporary, that they're treated differently or humiliated. I mean, the Safety, Health and Welfare at Work Act 2005 is very, very clear. Once you're an employee, anybody, the employer has to look after you. So whether you're temporary or anything else doesn't mean that people have a right to treat you or humiliate you. Another one would be hierarchies in organisations, where you'll see quite often is the case where people, it's just the higher levels, they don't think anything below them. Again, there's a number of the occupations, and I'm not too sure exactly the occupations that's on the screen, but it can just tell you that a number of occupations where there's a hierarchical system in place, and the people below are treated. You might as well not be there, you know, at all, as if, you know, we are the elite, you are down here. So I'm sure you've witnessed that as well. Changes in the workplace. Look, all change is not bad. I mean, sometimes change is good. And, you know, sometimes a place has to change. And usually the employees know that. People don't like it. I've heard of saying some people put up wall against change, and some people put up windmills. So a little bit of change in another time. Here's one would be the gender and age and balance. Again, I've watched this in group work, where you put all females, males in a group. The dynamic is completely different. So it's always good to have the age and the age and gender balance. If you can, of course, some occupations don't lend itself to that, but most do. And there should be a good balance. And even the age thing. I mean, for some reason in this country, and for those of us who are getting a little bit older, will recognise that people have a tendency to think that once you get to a certain age, you don't know anything. Sure, what would you know? But in most countries, people are regarded, when you get to an age of being knowledgeable and experienced, that you can add something. In this country, we have a tendency to think because you get to know that you should be put out the grass. You know, however, look at there's some of us just won't be put out the grass. So gender, age and balance, using, and this one here, the history of tolerance. If it's accepted in the organisation, it will continue. So wherever it's happening at the top, because it does permeate down. If someone at the top humiliates and is allowed to humiliate, and you'll see that all moving down you'll see that all moving down in the organisation to different grades. Once there's a history of people know, but it's generally from the top down. If it's not stopped early, it'll continue on down, and that's the reason a lot of bullying happens in the workplace, because people know it's being acceptable, it's being part of their work. It's being part of what's being norm. It's the culture of the organisation, and everybody knows the culture of the organisation determines what happens. So if there's a history there, it'll continue. So they're kind of signals and the risks. Okay, what are the effects? Well, fear and anxiety. When we done the survey of the FORSA members replied, there was, as I said earlier on, there was 4,891 people replied. Of that, people who replied, out of 68% that said they were being bullied, Fear and anxiety was the highest. Now think about this. If your anxiety levels are high, your self-esteem, your stress levels, your depression and desperation all come into that. You know, so think about it. So there was actually the anxiety out of it was 2,327 people stated that's how it affected them, the experience of being bullied in the workplace. So all of the loss of self-esteem, stress, desperation, and the loss of employment. People think that's people go, well, just leave the job, and some people decide that they just can't take it any longer. And suicide, this is something that surprised me. I can't say it didn't surprise me, but when we done the survey, 237 people said that they felt, suicide ideation. So they had a thought about suicide. Think about that for a second. 237 people said that they thought about committing suicide because of their work. Yeah, I was telling you, I was at a meeting yesterday in the Health and Safety Authority, and we were talking about how many people. It's been the lowest year, by the way, for people being killed, fatalities in the workplace at 28. If you went back 20 years ago, it'd been 68. But as I said, we don't know how many people commit suicide commit suicide as a result of workplace bullying. We do know that it does happen. Mm-hmm. We do know in an actual, probably the most prominent case in the last couple of years was the French Telecom case, where people actually wrote notes and said the reason they could not take it any longer, they decided to end their lives because of. Now I know we've had some issues, where people have written letters and said, but generally speaking, we don't know. So as far as I'm saying, when people say, workplace fatalities, if someone has committed suicide as a result of workplace bullying, that's a fatality, workplace fatality, as far as I'm concerned. So the figures are not correct, but they're also not correct about other, road traffic accidents and things like that. But the point about suicide is really important, that we don't know exactly what people decide that they can't take it any longer and they're going to end their life, which is a horrible thing. I often say that with suicide, when people think that life is no longer worth living, that must be a horrible thing, because life is wonderful, at least it should be. Okay. So those most at risk would be young people. Now, I have to say the survey, there wasn't enough. Maybe it was a sign of our membership, but young people in this group, all of the surveys that I've seen over the years have always said young people, especially in these recruits. Now, you might recall there'd been issues where people were being brought into employment because they were young, they were treated differently, they were humiliated in their workplace. There was cases of people, being assaulted, and there was one case I know of a young apprentice being chained to a bench. Horrible things like that. So because they're young, we should be, when we bring people in, think of that young person as your son, your daughter, your brother, your sister. Think about them like that. Don't think about them as being someone else's, because they're yours. So when they come in, we should always make sure we look after them, particularly if there's kind of a bit of a history, or we know there's a particular person in the organisation that will latch onto them and bully them. So just make sure you look after them. Persons who by age, gender, sexual orientation, ethnic or national religious background are different. So, because people are different, I've often said this on my course. One of the cases I dealt with when I was given a course going back a long time ago was when I was representing boards of voluntary agencies. A woman came up to me and said that her son, she had found a note in her son's bedroom, and it was a picture of a headstone with his name on it and a date about 6 weeks after that date, the date she found it. And above it then there was a hangman's noose with a head in it. And it transpired when she investigated, that when he was working in a factory, it was just outside of Dublin, and he was 17, he was constantly being called a queer by the other kids, by the other workers. And that kind of really, he'd gone through a bit of stuff, and he wasn't He was a 17-year-old that was still into his home computers and all that sort of stuff. He wasn't necessarily doing what the other 17-year-olds were doing, which was, going out with girls and things like that. But and like he was considering committing suicide because he was being humiliated in the workplace, which is a horrible thing. So, like, you just got to be very careful what you say to people. I know we a bit of banter is something different. This kind of calling somebody a name, or particularly today in today's world, we have to be very careful because people are you're always entitled to be different. They're more entitled to be different. If there is such thing as more entitled of being different today. So people have a right. People with speech impediments or other communications difficulty. Now it's gotten better, but there have been up to 25% of Irish people, it's Europe-wide as well, that had spelling differences, just communication difficulties, spelling, reading, writing difficulties, that they wouldn't be able to even read a medicine bottle or basic instructions. They couldn't read. And people, just because that's the case, doesn't make them stupid. In actual fact, quite the opposite. If you found, like, I know for a fact, I've known people I worked with on a building site that had very great difficulty reading and writing, but they were very, very clever. They got themselves around and they made a very, very good life for themselves. But doesn't mean they should be bullied. Yeah, that stupid fecker can't read, that stupid fella can't spell. So what? They shouldn't be humiliated, and they are at risk. Other communications difficulties, in today's world would be the internet stuff and the computer stuff that a lot of people of an age just don't know. I know when I look at, if we have a problem now, I ask my kids and they 2 minutes and they tell me that, do you not know this? I don't know it. I don't. If I knew it, I wouldn't be asking them. But it's just a matter of, thinking a little bit more about people around you. Just because they ask you, it doesn't make them, you shouldn't be humiliated over it. So just look after them. Okay, I better move. So what bullying is not. This is really important because the amounts of times we get, and we have done, and I'm sure you've got people say, I'm being bullied. And it may be they're just being told to do their own job. So there must be a pattern. There has to be a pattern, by the way. And if you look at the definition, the once-off instance, there's got to be continuous patterns before you can make a case under that definition. Okay, legitimate management responses to pressurized situations which require immediate action or which arise from staff shortages or increased workloads. Look, it always happens. But if it's happening all the time, that's a different situation that needs to be dealt with. But if you're being asked to roll up your sleeves today because someone didn't come in, there's been a difficulty, there's maybe a bereavement or whatever it may be, you're not, that's not. If it's a legitimate response, now the word legitimate is that if it is, and it's not a deliberate attempt to get you to do more work just because, something's happened. If it continuously, but legitimate requests are not, it's not bullying. We did have a case, and I certainly dealt with a case where someone told me, oh, this new manager has just taken over and she wants me to do things a different way. She constantly wants me to do different way. Everything I do is not right with her. And I said, is that the same? Yeah, everybody complained about her. Doesn't mean she's bullying. It just means she's looking for things, or he's looking for things to be done a different way. And, if she was picking on one person and humiliating them and make sure, then that could be considered okay. Constructive and fair criticism on employees' conduct or work performance. So if it's constructive and fair criticism, you'll know yourself most of the time, but sometimes it's easy to say, they're bullying me or she's wrong, he's wrong. Nobody likes to be criticised. None of us. But if it's constructive and it's fair, because you generally speak will know. And quite often, if your performance or if you're being allowed to come in late, or go away early, or you don't have to do as much work, so your own colleagues are often complaining. Your own colleagues are actually complaining to your manager. He may not say it. They'll go to the manager. Don't say, I said anything, but Mary stopped doing this, or John is not doing this. So you need to do something about that. We're all getting stuck. We've our caseload as such that we can't manage it, and he or she is allowed to do everything. So sometimes, if it's constructive, as I said, and it's not deliberate, that wouldn't be considered bullying. So what can be done if you are being bullied or those around you being bullied? So the new code of practice. The code of practice, I don't know whether you can actually see it. You may or you may not be able to see it.
Okay, I'll see it.
No, it doesn't. But anyway, look at the code of practice is for employees and employees on the prevention of and the resolution of bullying at work. It came out in 2020. It was published in January 2001, and it is a code of practice that was established by the WRC, which is the Workplace Relations Commission, and the Health and Safety Authority, the HSA. The aim of the code of practice, and it's worth, if you're looking at this, if you're representing somebody or you want to see yourself, it's worth having a look at this. The aim of the code is to provide guidance for employers and employees and represents on good practice and procedures for addressing and resolving workplace bullying. So for addressing and resolving workplace bullying. So that's the goal of it. It's to make sure so the new code of practice, it actually emphasizes early intervention. And the real difficulty here, and what people find with bullying, it takes so long to deal with. But early intervention is crucial. If we can nip it at the bud, that's when it should be. Mediation, resolving it at an entry stage. Now, when I talk about mediation at the workplace, you can also have a mediation, even if, once both sides agree, you can have a mediation before you take an official process into the WRC, the Workplace Relations Commission. Sorry, I'm using it WRC, but the Workplace Relations Commission. You can have mediation there before it moves on to the official forum. So an informal process of resolving issues and investigations. But to be honest with you, if you can get this early and get the mediation and try and get it sorted early, it's the best way, because I tell you, from my experience, and there has been cases won for bullying, but by God, they take a long time. And the person often that has been bullied even finds during that period of time that that time is even worse than the time you were being bullied. So try and get it sorted. It's the new code of practice, it emphasizes early intervention. Get it sorted at an early stage if you can. So what's the employer's duties? Now remember, the employer's duties under the Safety, Health and Welfare at Work Act. And I have the section up there, Section 82B, right, of the 2005 Act. So it's to say, remember, it's the safety, health and welfare. The welfare is not teas, towels and toilets. The welfare is the psychological welfare of people. So there's a requirement on the employer to manage and conduct and work activities in such a way as to prevent, as far as is reasonably practical. Now, the reasonably practical will be tested. The reasonably practical can be tested by saying, like, is it practical? I often use if say there was an unruly child in an SNA class or a school whereby someone is prone to a bit of violence, would it be reasonably practical to put 4 SNAs around them? No. But you'd have to put other situations in place. So they have to, as far as really practically, any improper conduct or behaviour likely to put safety, health and welfare at work of the employees. So they have to make sure they're in breach. The employer is in breach of his legal duties to provide you with a safe place of work if they don't do this. So they have to manage and conduct the activities in such a way as to prevent improper conduct. Okay? So employees' duties, it'd be wrong for us to just talk about employers' duties. So it's your duty, it's your colleague's duty not to engage in improper conduct or behaviour. So behaviour that is likely to endanger your own health and safety and welfare at work. So if somebody's putting your own or somebody else's in danger, well, then you're in breach of the Act as well. So good workplace front would have informal procedures, formal procedures and disciplinary code. And you might ask me what the disciplinary code is. There may have to be a disciplinary code for somebody makes some vexatious claims. So if you make a vexatious claim, there'll have to be, or the disciplinary code could be, and this is often why it's very, very hard to get a case of bullying, because if somebody is found to be bullying, they may have to being a bully, they have to be disciplined in some way or form. But I believe if they've made a vexatious claim, they may have to be disciplined. So the 3 procedures, I'll talk a little bit about the procedures in this further down a bit. Okay, just remember that some people just want it to end. Generally speaking, when someone came to me and said, Desi, I just want this to end, I don't want that. If it just stops, I'll be happy. Some people come in and say, I want them sacked. I want them out of here. But generally speaking, if people say to me when they're really being hurt, Tessie, if we can just get this to stop, I want it to stop. So where do you go? So sorry if the writing is a little bit small here because I'm even looking at it there. I've changed the size around a bit and obviously I hit the wrong button. But anyway, the employer. I mean, if you're actually being bullied, like if you're being bullied, you go and you've approached the person and said you're unhappy with the way they're treating you. Well, then they should after they should go to the employer and say, I'm feeling I'm being bullied. They may have to put something in place, or they will have to put something in place. The union, if you're not getting satisfaction, the WRC and say, just let me say to you that the Health and Safety Authority, you can ring the Health and Safety Authority. They have a workplace contact unit. So if you're just looking for information about what bullying is or whether or not your case meets the criteria under the definition, you can ring the Health and Safety Authority. And if you just say you're looking for information, they lodge it as being a request for information or RFI, right? A request for information. But if you're making a formal complaint, they'll do it as the workplace contact unit. They will actually approach the employer and see whether or not, because they're supposed to have in their health and safety statement, they're supposed to have the bullying outline, what they do and what they don't do for bullying to make sure it doesn't happen in the workplace. So if they're not doing that, the Health and Safety Authority may come and visit them. They will actually contact the employer if you make a complaint. If you just want information, you can ring them. So adjudication, I just want to explain that everybody's under the impression that when they go to the adjudication, so that's the adjudication in the Workplace Relations Commission. I said earlier on, so I said earlier on that that's the Workplace Relations Commission, they have a mediation service. So if you only want a mediation, they do that. The adjudication officer will not rehear your case. They'll just establish whether or not that your employer has met the test for, did they follow the proper procedures? That's what they'll test. You won't be coming out and saying they did or didn't bully you. They'll say they didn't meet the criteria to it. You can go to the Labour Court, and of course, there's been lots of civil actions taken for people who have been bullied in the workplace. So prevention policies, employers' responsibility would be outlining bullying practices, ensure that incidents are dealt with through disciplinary procedures, develop an anti-bullying policy and action plan, assign responsibility for dealing with allegations of bullying, establish a complaints procedure, and provide information and training and provide early intervention. Again, here we're back to early intervention. The union's role is to highlight the problem, provide training for representatives, which we do. And I know Fiona is constantly, we're constantly doing health and safety course, so we do provide representative training. If you're looking for any training, we can give the training. Give information on rights and duties to the report, raise the issue with the employer and propose a model agreement. That's a model agreement. Inside, you can have an agreement on what they do and how it's dealt with. But it's important that the employees, through their union, are highlighting it. So the Health and Safety Authority looks at health and safety statement, ensure that, of course, workplace bullying, investigates complaints and procedures being correctly being utilised. So what the policy should contain, should statements of intent by the employer, objections of policy, the definition of sexual harassment and all of that. You'll have a separate one. You'll have the definition of bullying, but you'll have a separate one then for sexual harassment and harassment. Okay, and responsibility of employees and complaints procedure. Right. Yeah. So again, just as I said, complaints procedure, advise the person that behaviour is unacceptable. This is the informal approach. Raise the issue with local management, request an intervention and seek advice. The formal one has to be in writing, to who the complaint should be given against, a time scale, confidentiality. All of these things will have to be, the procedures have to have confidentiality in it, because the word gets out such and such, even if they're not bullying. Someone said such and such is a bully. It's hard to get that tag taken off you. Appeals procedure and something for malicious or vexatious complaints. Okay, just the last slide I'm going to use. It's the resources, the various different resources, the framework agreement 2007 for harassment and violence at work. That's worth having a look at. Framework agreement for work-related stress, work-related psychosocial risks in healthcare and long-term care sectors, trade union and mental health, ICTU document 2021, code of practice for bullying work, which I spoke about, and the health and safety source book, which you can get from the Health and Safety Authority. Okay, thank you. Are there any questions?
Yes. So I'm going to just stop presenting so we can see everyone, hopefully. Where are we gone? Okay. So we have a couple of questions, Jesse. So one is employer duty slide. Is that what we call duty of care?
Well, that would be, if you have a duty of care anyway, but that's their duties as outlined in the Safety, Health and Welfare at Work Act, Section 8.
Okay.
You can look that up at any time. If they're not adhering to that, you can go to them. Now, I'm not suggesting anybody go in and sound like a solicitor under Section 8. You can actually copy that. You'll pick that up. If you look for it, the 2005 Act, you can cut that up and you could actually photocopy it. And if they're not taking notice of it, you could actually post it to them or email it to them.
Okay. We have another question. How does one go about getting, procuring and bringing in a facilitator at an early informal stage?
There's lots of facilitators out there, but I would always say use the service of the WRC, because they have a mediation service. If you have both, if they've agreed to bring in a facilitator, they might also agree to go to the WRC. I've seen this. I brought it in on a couple of occasions, not for bullying, but for different issues. And I have to say it worked really, really well. So it's there. It's a free service. So the employer doesn't have to pay a penny to any facilitator. But there's lots of facilitators out there that can do it.
Another question is, how far does duty of care go? Is checking the staff, all staff, every 30 minutes all right, especially as we work directly with the public on the front line? I mean, checking if you are at work, checking how long you're at the bathroom. Is this considered bullying? I
wouldn't say it's considered bullying, but if it's only been done to one or two people, if someone's doing that, that's bad management as far as I'm concerned. Is it deliberately bullying? I'm not too sure. I wouldn't be saying someone spent an hour in the bathroom. Is that wrong? Is there a time someone should be as far as I'm saying, no. But I wouldn't necessarily consider it bullying. But every situation, if it's only one department that they do that, maybe someone needs to talk to the person.
Someone's just asking about the slides, so we will circulate the slides and any other details that Jesse has given to all the registered participants for today. Does union workplace representatives have a responsibility to raise concern of a member being bullied, even if the member hasn't actually agreed to this due to fear of the bully, in this case, their manager? Okay. So how do you handle that where the person is a bit...
Well, again, it's very delicately, because the person's not willing to come forward. It's very difficult. Even if you go to the Health and Safety Authority, they'll ask you, you'll have to have a name. You'll have to give a name, and it's very difficult to approach somebody. But if I was a union representative in the organisation I work, I would make sure I would raise the issues and say the way you treat that person is not acceptable. They haven't said anything to me. But the problem is, often you get this. People say, can you do that don't say I said anything. Sometimes you might have to come forward. But there's a way and a means. You've got to be very delicate in these approaches, because some people will genuinely see, I've raised the issue, and now it's worse for me now that I've raised it. So be very, very careful. If you're raising it, make sure that the person is like, I'll do this subtly, I'll do it informally, I won't say who it is, all right, and you might get permission to do that. But be very, very careful if the person has told you not to raise it. But it's not, if you see that someone's being humiliated, it's not a bad idea to raise the issue and say, have a look at this. This is not right. Don't wait for someone to say, I can't work here any longer.
Okay, I don't see any other questions in the chat. I'm just checking on my phone here, the question from the meeting. So, okay, who do you go to? Okay, so somebody hasn't finished their question yet. Zig M. Who do you go to report it if you, but I don't see the end of that question. So if you have, okay, sorry, who do you go to report if the person is the manager in HR?
If the manager's the HR manager, well, obviously there'll be somebody, generally speaking, there's someone above them, and you may have to go to them. So look, you might have to find someone above them. The best thing to do, The best thing as far as I'm concerned to do is to raise the issue with the HR manager and say you feel that they're being bullied, you're bullying people, or they may have to do it that way, or get the representative to do it. I've had to do it. I've had to do it in the organisations where someone's come to me and where the HR person has been bullying people.
Okay, Desi, I just want to say thank you so much for delivering this session for us. We had about 40 people on at lunchtime, and I think we'll have it recorded so we can circulate it to everybody else who registered, because we had 200 register for today. If people don't have any other questions, I will just leave it at that and say thank you all for your attention. Thank you all for our regular Lunch and Learn participants, because you're the people who are keeping this going for us through the year. I just want to say we will be back in 2024, the last Friday in January. The topic is under discussion at the minute, but we will be putting this on the training program as a regular permanent feature. So we will have 12 sessions next year in 2024. And it just leaves me to say thank you so much for your attention and your engagement with us. And we wish you a really, really happy Christmas and New Year, and we will see you all again early next year.
And just remember, at the end of the day, like, we do need to raise the issues in the employment. It's so important. Don't let someone suffer. Let's if we have a policy, look at your own policy in your workplace and see what do we do. Does it contain a bullying policy? And if it doesn't, it's in breach. If your safety statement doesn't contain a bullying policy, then it's in breach of the Safety, Health, Welfare and Work Act. Okay, thank you.
And thanks. And we will be putting these sessions, health and safety, on in the reps training next year. We might look at putting in dignity at work and, dealing with bullying, and probably in separate sessions in 2024. So just keep an eye out for your e-bulletins and your talk to your branch executive committee members. All right. Take care.
Bye.
Have a good Christmas and break. Thanks, guys.